Hey, welcome back. I'm John Stark from MacTheMovieGuy.com, and this is a review of My Policeman. It's an Amazon release, so if you got Prime Video, you got My Policeman. I can make so many jokes using this film title. I don't think I'm gonna make any. It's kind of a serious film. Anyway, I'm a blind film critic, so I review films with audio description, and this film has audio description. So cool. So just to explain the film takes place in two different timelines. There's the older version of the trio and the younger version of the trio. So just to get you a little bit aligned in space, so to speak. Gina McKee and Emma Corrin, that's the older and then the younger version of that character. Linus Roach and Harry Styles, older and then younger. And Rupert Everett and David Dawson are the older and younger of the third character. So, those are the six main characters in the film. Really, I mean, anybody else who comes in and out of this film really does come in and out of this film. They don't really maintain anybody else other than the versions of this trio. It centers around a complicated love story. Woman falls in love with her policeman, who is the woman is Emma Corrin. Back in the day, the back in the day version is Emma Corrin from The Crown. She was the one that got all the praise for playing Princess Diana. In case you're like, who is that? Am I supposed to know who that is? Yeah, it's The Crown. And she's kind of the lead of the film. Nobody's really a lead. They're all sort of, the six of them are sort of all co-leads. So she is the one that falls in love with her policeman, Tom, who is played by Harry Styles. And they have sort of like a good relationship, and then they end up meeting this Patrick after taking a tour of a museum, and Patrick is played by David Dawson. And as she's sort of exploring her life and they move forward, there becomes sort of this really complicated love relationship. I don't want to call it a triangle, even though early on in the relationship, Emma Corrin does talk about how perfect she would be with David Dawson because they enjoy all of the same things. But it really is complicated because it's also a movie about being gay at a time when being gay in Britain got you arrested and thrown in jail and called a pervert and all sorts of things, and got you beaten up because it was not good. It was not safe. People couldn't function. They couldn't go about their daily lives. They couldn't just be who they wanted to be. So they had to sneak around in secret. So even though Tom kind of is in both relationships, Harry Styles is in both relationships in this thing, you always get the suspicion that if the world was different, that he would choose Patrick. But then, not necessarily, because in the future, we jump forward in the future, and what has happened is Patrick, the older version of Patrick, played by, again, Rupert Everett, he has had a stroke, and he lives now with the other two who have stayed married after all this time. And the film actually starts with them, which is why all of this feels like a giant spoiler, but it's really sort of convoluted because the film does time jumps quite regularly throughout the film. We'll talk about it in a second, but it does a lot of time jumps. So even though I told you sort of what the main story is, that is what the main story is, but you also get to see sort of the end results of it, which is Gina McKee is taking care of Everett who's stubborn, and there's this drama, and you don't really know why there's drama, and so you kind of have to watch it sort of unfold. And as you watch it unfold, it's really through McKee's eyes as she reads the diary. And Tom is not happy, does not want him there, won't have anything to do with him, won't go in and see him. She's the one who has to feed him. She's the one who bathes him. She's the one who bathes Patrick, everything like that. So it's a very interesting film. But I'm not 100% sure that the time jumps work the way that they want it to. I don't know if the film would have worked better in the past or in the present, but sometimes it feels like we're losing momentum by jumping around so much, or that I think the director who also wrote Philadelphia, like that's kind of the biggest thing that he's known for, is I think that he doesn't quite know when to cut. So he just kind of cuts when he feels like the story needs to cut back. Like it's been a minute since we've touched base with the cast in the past, and there's a happy medium here. I remember watching A Jazzman's Blues and feeling like, okay, so we started in the present with this investigation of the case, and then we only touched base one time until the end. There was like the beginning, there was this one time where we like reminded the audience that this dude was reading a letter, and then like the end, we went back to the present. So it was just kind of like, why in that film? But this film has a lot of richness in the more present day. It's not current. It's hard to tell you because they don't actually say 1990 what, 2000 what. It kind of feels like a late 90s, early 2000s vibe. It doesn't quite feel like today. First of all, they're not that old, so Rupert Everett would need to be like 95 for some of this math to work out, but which is not. So it's just that's a little bit of what it is. It's the time jumps don't quite work. They kind of slow the movie down, and you kind of end up going back and forth. As far as the acting goes, this film is kind of propped up, I would say, mostly by Emma Corrin and Jenny McKee, their characters, because they're the ones that are uncovering this thing, this relationship. They're the ones that are feeling betrayed. They're the ones that are having to make choices. The weakest actor in this really is Harry Styles, and I'm not doing that just to like be like, mean to Harry Styles or anything like that. He really is like, a lot of his line readings are really flat. You can tell he hasn't fully comprehended what it is that he's saying. It's not the way somebody potentially would speak in those sentences. The problem is that he shares all of his scenes with Emma Corrin, who was fantastic in The Crown. I mean, we've seen her range. She's fantastic here. Or he shares them with David Dawson, who I wasn't really familiar with until now, but I can tell you David Dawson is also a fantastic actor. So he ends up being on screen with people who fully have a grasp of how to navigate a conversation, and he ends up sort of just feeling like, even though he's the titular character, just kind of there. Like he doesn't really have a full fleshed out character. He's just there for other people to develop around, but that his character doesn't really have a whole lot of growth. They try to give him growth. They try to find scenes for him to explore emotions. It just never really works out. And then to parallel that, of the adult cast, Linus Roach doesn't really have that much to do compared to Gina McKee or Rupert Everett. They kind of focus again on those two. He has a little bit more to do towards the end, but most of the time he's just kind of always walking away and not participating. So that character ends up being the weaker of the of the three characters. But it's an interesting film. It has a lot of sex in it, both kinds, by the way. So, in case you were wondering, in case there's anybody out there that's like, is this? It's no. Tom goes both ways. So there's just a lot of sex. I think nudity was the number one reason this film was rated R for nudity. So that's a fair assumption for this film. There isn't really a whole lot of other things to rate this film R for other than sex/nudity. I think there's a little bit of violence because, they don't like them gay folk back then in Britain. I should have done a Britain accent. I did an American accent on that. But they don't take kindly. Yeah, so it's not really a happy film for every character. It's kind of a serious film. This film hasn't been getting great reviews, and while I didn't love it, I liked it. It has its problems. I wish that the time jumps were handled a little bit better, so that they didn't interrupt when the story in the past was getting momentum, and then suddenly it's like, okay, well, we're checking in on the future versions of them. Cool. Because you kind of feel like that's where the meat of the story is, because you're uncovering the mystery, right? Like, that's what they're talking about. You're trying to figure out why doesn't Tom want to see Patrick in the future? Why is Patrick so angry? Why is she working to try to solve this problem? What's going on? And then you're watching it and you're getting the answers. But when you get closer to an answer, it just flips you back to the future versions of them. And you're like, momentum. And then it just never really gets started. So that's why this is kind of like a failed Oscar bait movie, is because it does it to itself. It's not that the film itself is bad, but it's not edited well. It's just not comprised well. No, people did not put thought into where we should cut, where we should go back and forth. And Harry Styles really does deliver a weak performance here. I know I need to see Don't Worry Darling. It just dropped on HBO Max. So I may be saying this in 2 films this year. I had no intention of doing that to him twice in the same year. But I did feel that from him. I did feel the noticeable difference in quality of performance from him. Anyway, overall, though, I would actually recommend this film because I did like it in general. The audio description for this is good. It's British, but the film takes place in Britain with an entirely British cast, so that made sense. It wasn't weird. It was just like, oh, yeah, I'm British. Okay. And they had to describe a lot of sex scenes that I don't think we would have gotten otherwise. There's a lot of attempted hookups and stuff in little brief moments where they try to steal moments away that aren't even full-on sex scenes, that if you didn't have audio description, you wouldn't necessarily know they're happening, because they kind of, they'll push up against a wall for 2 seconds around a corner and just make out or whatever. It's these little stolen moments that you would lose otherwise. So it's a well-described film, and I'm glad that we are describing it. So I think it's time for me to drop a grade on this thing. Yeah, you've heard the problems. You've heard my thoughts. So I'm going to go with, for my Policeman, I'm going with a B-. So generally, that's a pretty decent grade. It's not great. This is not a great film, but it's got good acting in it. Not great. I mean, I'm not saying any of these people should be winning awards, but I was generally overall happy with the cast that wasn't Harry Styles. So check it out. It's I feel like there's a story here that you might like. So it's not bad. I feel like maybe the film is getting that kind of buzz where it feels like you're watching a bad film, but you're really not watching a bad film. You're just watching a film that isn't extraordinary. You're just watching a good film. You know, sometimes just being a good film or a good enough film should be fine. If you stayed this long, you must like me a little bit, so please think about subscribing. I would like to get to 100 by the end of the year and become triple-digit YouTuber. I think that would be cool. So please hit that subscribe. You can also go to my website, macthemovieguy.com, for more reviews. You can go to the audio description project, adp.acb.org. It'll let you know what has audio description and where you can watch it. And you can go to theadna.org, where you can look up your favorite movies and television shows and find out who is working on them in the audio description department. That's it for me today, and I will check in with you guys when I review something else, and I'll see you on the other side.